All right, welcome back, Latin. Yes, it seems like my lighting is very mysterious, but I think it's fine. I think it's a dark presentation. So this actually worked, like not dark in terms of subject matter. I don't think I went there, but like look at how dark this is. So it's all working out. Everything happens for a reason. So anyhow, yes, let's stop messing around. I do have a kitten going crazy in the background, but we'll see what happens with that. So, hello. Yes, we are here to talk about Caput 16, third declension adjectives. And so, this is meant to be a deeper dive into something I introduced in a very shallow fashion in class yesterday, and with some full examples, full paradigm examples. So Wheelock will give you the paradigms for these. I highly recommend you get as familiar as possible as you can with those. This just has paradigms that are slightly more fleshed out, so it might be slightly useful for you to consult those. But before we start talking about specific things like paradigms, let us again remind ourselves of some background. Up until this week, we have been working with first and second declension adjectives, also known as adjectives of three endings. Magnus, magnum, magnum is kind of one of the big ones. It's a first and second declension adjective because magnus and magnum follow the second declension paradigm and magna follows the first declension paradigm. And it is an adjective of three endings because it has three endings. The masculine has a distinct set of endings, the feminine has a distinct set of endings, and the neuter has a distinct set of endings, and that is three. Thank goodness we just did the number chapter. So, yeah, so this is a paradigm just of the singular. So here's our masculine, here's our feminine, and here's our neuter. And you can see those endings, which hopefully just resonate in your heart. You're so familiar with them, all is well. So, this is what we have been doing. We have also, however, seen some variation on these. Most notably, most recently, we've learned, well, I mean, not most recently, but we've learned unus, una, unum. This is an example of that whole family of adjectives that has unius and uni in the genitive rather than genitive and dative rather than a normal paradigm. So you are familiar with some unusual adjectives of three endings, and you also are familiar with how the adjective of three endings, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to find the stem. If you look at an adjective like pulcher, pulcra, pulcrum, that's an adjective of three endings, but you have to look to the feminine to figure out what the stem is. Just similarly, liber, liberal, liberum, noster, nostrum, nostrum. These are all just variations on adjectives of three endings. But at the end of the, oh, sorry, I just kicked the kitten. We've had a, it's been so windy today, it's been nuts. So we're all a little bedraggled. Anyhow, so we know some variations. This is just me building you up to demonstrate that you know a lot of stuff and you are flexible when it comes to these things. And most recently, we learned the delightful duo, 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 which means two. Remember, this is a funny adjective because some of the forms are first or second and some are third, third declension ending. So it's a nice bridge, really, duo is. We also have been working on the amazingness of noun adjective agreement. You are all excellent at this, and you're all aware that of the problems that arise when you, well, not problems, but really opportunities for creativity that arise when you put, say, a first declension adjective like magnus with a third declension noun like kiwis. The endings just don't match up. If you put a first declension adjective like una with a third declension noun that's feminine like wis, etc., etc., you know that those are a challenge. I don't need to remind you, but you can do it. You have done it, and so that's fantastic. So yeah, so now we are going to learn third declension adjectives. These are also known, kind of misleading, as adjectives of two endings or adjective of one ending or adjective of three endings. We're going to talk about that. I think it's maybe just better to think of these as third declension adjectives because the number of endings ultimately isn't super helpful. But when we say adjectives of two or one ending, the reason that's helpful is because that's how you're going to find it in the dictionary. Some of these adjectives you'll find will have the two endings and some will have the one ending, but you'll know that's an adjective of the third declension if it has fewer than three, and we'll see some examples of that. We have already learned before Wednesday, we learned the adjective tres tria. That is a pretty standard third declension adjective. Notice Trace tria, that's an adjective of two endings insofar as the trace applies to masculine and feminine, and tria applies for neuter. So everything under the trace column applies to masculine and feminine, and everything under the tria column applies to the neuter. And those all correspond to third declension I stem nouns. So yeah, that's something we've learned already. So here are some examples of these adjectives using our new vocabulary for chapter 16. So acer, acris, acra, that's a third declension adjective. In particular, we know that, well, I mean, is this right? We can see this in particular because of this E in the neuter nominative. Yeah, so I guess that's a pretty common. I wrote this slide. I don't know why I'm doubting this slide, but I'm assuming I thought if you see a neuter ending in E, that's a pretty good sign you're in third declension family. The fact that we have this acris, that's another sign of a third declension family. Yes, keller, kelleris, kellera is another example of the third declension where you have three endings, but kellera ends in an E and that's the neuter, and kelleris, the feminine ends in an I. Yeah, so these are just examples of how we can have third declension adjectives with three endings, but they're relatively rare. The more common example is adjectives of two endings, brewis, brewa. Here too, we have the neuter ending in E and that IS. So there's brewis, that covers the masculine feminine, and brewa covers the neuter. So this is a much more common example of an adjective of two endings that is a third declension adjective. Difficulus, difficula is another example. Dulcis, dulca, faculis, facula, fortis, forta, omnis, omnia. These are all adjectives of two endings, third declension adjectives. And these are ones that we're going to become very familiar with over the course of this chapter. And then finally, we have adjectives of one ending, third declension adjectives of one ending, which is, I think it's misleading, but in the dictionary you would just find ingens and gentis. That's the only thing you would find in the dictionary heading. So that's why we call it an adjective of one ending. We're going to find out pretty soon that there's two distinct sets of endings for that, but that'll be a fun surprise for a few minutes from now. So potens is another one, in senex. Ingens, potens, and senex are pretty much the big third declension adjectives of one ending that we are learning. And then this is just a review. I think I was just going through the vocabulary in chapter 16. I want to make sure you know what everything is doing. Jucundus, longus, these are adjectives we already know. These are third declension, second declension, first declension adjectives of three endings. So don't overthink it. You know those already. But Jucundus, that's a good adjective. We'll use it. It's going to be great. Okay, so now let's talk about, once you've identified a third declension adjective, how do you decline a third declension adjective? And my number one piece of advice would be just keep consulting the paradigms. They are on page 496 of Wheelock, or if you're using a different ending, different edition, it'll be in the back of Wheelock, but find the paradigm, keep using it, create a copy of it, do something, but keep consulting the paradigms. These adjectives do decline just like third declension nouns for the most part. The nominative singular, therefore, is very unpredictable, but once you get to the genitive, you're in the is, e, am, family, so pretty much stick to it. But, and this is just a delight that everyone loves, there are a few little tweaks that only apply to the adjectives, really, that you have to keep an eye out for. Specifically, there is an I in the ablative singular for every adjective. We learned earlier the neuter I stem nouns have I's in the ablative singular, but that's it. Most third declension nouns have E's in the ablative singular, but all third declension adjectives have I in the ablative singular. They also have IUM in the genitive plural and IA if it's a neuter nominative and accusative or accusative. Yeah, so we'll see some examples. So here's that adjective of three endings we talked about earlier, keller, kelleris, kellera. So this is the third declension adjective with that beautiful E and the neuter, the IS. But so what's interesting about this, it does look like it has three endings because keller is masculine, kelleris is feminine, and kellera is neuter. Look at beautiful distinct endings. But then once we get to the genitive, the feminine and the masculine combine. So they are only different in the nominative singular. And then calorus, 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 calorie, 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 calorum, calorum, and then look at that neuter. So that's neuter as always. The accusative and the nominative are the same, calora, which makes it distinct from the masculine and feminine. But then they all come back together and are the same for ablative singular. Nominative plural has that es ending for the masculine feminine. So that hopefully looks pretty common to you. And that calaria, and look at that I there. And again, IUM in the genitive plural, calaribus, caleras, calaria, etc. I keep thinking this word must be related to calorie, and my brain is like, yeah, because calories are swift, and I imagine a calorie being a little thing that runs around. And then of course that's not the same. They're not related. Calorie and calorie are not related, though of course calorie is related to the Latin word for heat, but don't make that mistake. These are not the same word. Okay, but so here's brewis, brewa, an adjective of two endings. It's a third, but we have three columns here because I wanted you to make sure you knew that masculine feminine column, like how that all played out. So I do believe Wheelock just combines these into one, and that's fine, but you can see for yourself that those endings are exactly the same between masculine and feminine, and then neuter has its own little special column. So brewis, brewa, the genitive singulars are all the same, the dative singulars are all the same. These two have the same accusative singular, and we of course have our distinct neuter, and the ablative singulars are all the same. Brewia versus brewis, brewas, brewium, brewium, brewium. You see the point. You see where I'm going with this. But so there's that paradigm. Of course, brewis means brief. Yeah, I used to know this. I used to know why the Starbucks has a drink called breve, and I used to know why it was called that. And I feel like it was related, but I can't remember now. Anyhow, if you know, you can enlighten us. So yeah, that's an adjective of two endings, a third declension adjective, two endings. And then here's the one that may be a little bit tricky. This is technically an adjective of one ending, fortis, forta. You know what I'm talking about. This is an adjective of two endings, but I wanted to show you how Wheelock gives it to you. It just pushes that masculine and feminine together into one column because they match up completely. So you've got that, and then the neuter is different. Yes. And here is our adjective of one ending, senex, senis. This is a challenging one, I would say, because it's an adjective. It is an adjective meaning old, but oftentimes in Latin, it just means old man. You know, you'll see it and it just means old man. It's practically substantive in that. So, but it can occasionally just be an adjective. So if you wanted to say like old boy, senex pais, that's how you would do it. So though this is an adjective of one ending, there's still a masculine feminine column on the one hand and a neuter on the other, because of course, though their nominatives are the same, senex is masculine, feminine, and neuter, the accusatives are going to be different. We'll still have a neuter accusative of senex, but the masculine feminine will be senem, and the nominative plural will be different. Senia versus senes in the nominative and the accusative. So though it's technically an adjective of one ending, these two columns do diverge in ways that are very predictable according to the rules we already know for the neuter. All right, so moving forward, our big challenge is going to be noun adjective agreement. I think this is going to be what we're doing on the quiz on Monday, but probably what I will do is just give you a noun, like, hey, here's the noun feminam, which third declension form agrees with it. Excuse me, I had some pizza for dinner. It was delightful, something like this. But it's hard, and we're going to keep doing it. Just keep remembering to match the adjective, the noun, in case, number, and gender, and consulting paradigms when you need to do so. So for example, this could be just a fun way to spend your weekend. What form of ingens agrees with aetatem? Oh, I already did these. Well, so, but we'll do them together and then you'll do them by yourself. So aetatem is feminine, accusative, and singular. So we would just find the form of that from ingen. So you'd have ingentem. Because aetatem is a third declension noun, those endings are going to match up. Ingentem, aetatem. But reginas is also a feminine. It's accusative and plural, but it's a first declension noun. So ingentes is the form that agrees with it because ingentes is feminine, accusative, and plural, but the endings don't look the same because they're not the same declension. Difficulus, what agrees with caput? Caput is neuter, nominative or accusative, so we'd have difficula agreeing with caput. These are both third declension nouns, so of course it looks weird because they all look weird in the nominative. So that's fine. And then what form of difficulus agrees with ora? Ora is neuter, nominative, or accusative plural. Difficilia is the form with, of course, that distinct I in the plural. Okay, so I'm going to leave these to you. You can review them. I think you get the point. Yeah, so that's it for today. For Friday, I'm sorry this is late. If you're watching this tonight, Thursday night, for tomorrow we're going to do 1 through 10 of the Exercitationes and maybe read through Juvenal Explains His Impulse to Satire on page 136. We'll see how it goes. I think it's going to be a pretty chill day tomorrow. So, okay, I hope this was helpful. We'll just keep practicing it. Don't worry if it doesn't all come together immediately. This is just something we're going to be working on for the rest of our lives. So, have a great night. How do I turn